I keep asking myself, what brought me to Buddhism? And to be honest, it all happened how many years ago now? 1994, 95. At the time, I remember having an argument with somebody I was working with, and we had an argument, and I just couldn't get the argument out of my system. I was so annoyed with the way this other person was doing stuff, like we were working in theatre together. But anyway, I was so kind of annoyed with them that it was affecting me as a human being, and I knew it was affecting me. Like, I'd get up in the morning and I wouldn't feel good. And so I was carrying a certain anger around with me. And I went to Jampiling. I went to a Tibetan Buddhist centre in West Cavan. I went into a woman who was running it, Marjorie Cross, and I said I'd be interested in getting involved in Buddhism. And I remember she said to me, you're responsible for your own life. That's the heart of Buddhism. And that's where I get that idea. And it stayed with me all these years that one of the real things that awakens you as a person in life is that you are responsible for everything you do. You're responsible for your own life. And, your actions have results and consequences. And that is a liberating idea. And that was the first thing that happened to me when I went to Jampiling. And at the time, it was the summer, it was midsummer. And Rinpoche, the teacher, was away in Mongolia. And for me, that didn't matter. I mean, I wanted to take refuge in Rinpoche. I wanted to be a student of Rinpoche. It didn't matter that he was away. I wasn't thinking about his personality or something. I just felt I needed Buddhism. And the reason I did was because I was carrying anger around with me, and I wanted to learn some sort of practice or mind training that would get rid of it. So I went in the door to study Buddhism entirely for reasons that would be to do with psychotherapy. I saw in Buddhism a psychotherapy. I saw that it was mind training. And if I did that, it would help me live a better life. And I don't mean a virtuous life, but it would free me, I hoped, from a sense of anger. And that's about as simple as it was for me. And the biggest thing that I learned in the practice of Buddhism over the years was what I was talking about last week in the first of these talks. And that is a sense that there's something physical, there's something totally physical about the metaphysics, if you like, of Buddhism. Like, there's something about embodiment, like, we in the West, we tend to divide things into body and soul. And our metaphysics are like that. We use words, we use language from Greek philosophy to talk about everlasting life and the body and the soul and this, that and the other. But in Tibetan Buddhism, it was like this was just about the physical, and yet it was totally about the spiritual. There was a sense of unity, like you're here as a human being, but your humanity is the expression of a spiritual reality. There's some core of your identity, the spiritual side, which expresses itself physically. The kind of unity of those two seemed to me stronger than it was in the Christian tradition, because the Christian tradition had used body and soul, ideas from Greek philosophy, and in some way they had come to a point where those ideas were redundant. The kind of grammar of Greek metaphysics was no longer working for people in the West. So there was no way to contextualize Christ or faith. And so you get people saying, no, I don't believe in God. No, I don't believe in afterlife. No, I don't believe in all that stuff. And it was like they would dismiss it, like all that old stuff. And you couldn't get back to what I wanted to get back to, was a sense of faith. When I experience myself physically, I'm not really hearing the full depth of what it is to be me. When I try mindfulness, there is a threshold, there's some moment where I awaken to the fact that this is not merely a physical experience, that the physical manifestation of being here now is only a small part of what it is to be here now. I am here with you. You are here. And the nature of that presence has a physical dimension. But that physical dimension is only a small part of it. Buddhism gave me a way to enter into that reality of who I am, and to dissolve negative emotions like anger. Anger, jealousy, all the other negative, disturbing emotions are part of what makes up myself. And I think that that's just everything. I think that's just the totality of me. But Buddhism allowed me enter into the experience of being me at a deeper level, where I began to see the anger as something that the deeper self could dissolve. Disturbing emotions began to look like clouds in the sky. The mind began to become the sky. And it is the biggest gift that I've experienced in Buddhism is non-violence, ahimsa. And it's, when they talk about non-violence, they're not talking about war, and they're not talking about having opinions about war, and they're not talking about being a pacifist politically. Non-violence is something that you practice in terms of body, speech, and mind, and is total. So you do not say a negative word. And if you commit to that, if you promise not to say a negative word about anything or anybody, your mind will actually warn you. You won't get away with it. You can't fool yourself. It's like your conscience comes into operation. If I say I'm not going to say a negative word about anybody, and then I'm at the dinner table and somebody says, what do you think of, let's say, Liz Truss? And I want to say, I think she's an idiot. I think she's crashed the car of the British economy. And I want to say negative things because I dislike her. Well, those emotions, those negative emotions, cannot come to the surface without my conscience looking in and saying, you promised you wouldn't say a negative word about anybody. Now, at that stage, I may just thank my conscience and tell him to go to sleep, and then tell myself, look, I'm doing no harm. This is just politics, and I'm just going to share at the table all the negative feelings I have about Liz Truss being an idiot. But that's not good enough. Body, speech, and mind. With your speech, you're not going to say a negative word. You're not going to say killing words about somebody. You're not going to say really black, evil, negative things about somebody. But in this, there's no halfway measure. Ahimsa, non-violence, is to say, I will say nothing negative. No word negative. And it's only when you go completely to that point that you can get the benefit. It's like you can't half close a leak. If you want to contain water in a jar and there's a tap at the bottom of the container, you either turn it off or you don't. You can't turn it off 90% and leave a little bit coming out, because it will still empty completely eventually. It's the same with negative speech, that if you want to practice non-violence in speech, it is to say that you won't say a negative word. You won't verbally express negative emotions. Doesn't mean that I couldn't analyse Liz Truss's competence as a Prime Minister and acknowledge that she has bungled the job and that she has crashed the car. But I would be doing it with analysis. I wouldn't be doing it with emotion behind it. And it's amazing how many times when we're talking politics, we actually get emotional. We actually talk with a sort of heated emotion. And it's also amazing that if you do overcome that negative emotion in your speech, and if you do actually, let's say, reply to the question, what do you think of Liz Truss? And you smile and you're conscious not to be negative, but at the same time you're able to articulate the weaknesses of Liz Truss as a Prime Minister, you'll find that actually more people agree with you than normal. you'll find that you're becoming a more plausible person. You'll find that more people listen to you. I find that really extraordinary. And I found it all the time, because when I was young, before this great event in the early 90s when I became a Buddhist, when I was younger, I really used to enjoy a good argument, and I would get emotional in an argument, and I would get negative in an argument. And sometimes I wouldn't be able to understand why people didn't agree with me and listen to me. Because I had the right arguments, or so I thought. Well, maybe my arguments were right or wrong, but that's not why people weren't listening. They weren't listening because I was delivering stuff with negative emotion. And there I was, learning how to be non-violent in speech, to not say a negative word. And it didn't make me less critical. I became more critical because I had to work harder if I was trying to analyse somebody like Liz Truss. I'd make an effort to analyse them in a more rational way. Now, don't think for one moment that I practice this at all successfully, and don't even think that I practice it consciously, because I don't. I'm still living in the same pool of negativity and disturbing emotion as everybody else. But the difference is that for the last 28 years, I've had a language or a grammar to help train my mind. And so having the grammar, having a kind of a language that shapes out how to speak in a healthy way, at least it allows me to know where I am. You know, it allows me to know when I'm wrong. It's like if you have a compass, you know when you're going north, but you also know when you're not going north, because the compass is telling you, well, you're not going the right way there. So it's not that I'm a hugely better person in terms of performance, if you like. I still say negative things. I still get caught up with anger and rage and end up just whining and whinging and ranting. I think ranting is a great male thing. I think it's like there's something about testosterone and ranting that go together. You know, like I noticed as I get older, I noticed the amount of women who kind of just put up with men ranting. And it's not that they feel the males are talking rubbish. It's not that they feel they're talking the truth. It's like what's getting in the way is the negative emotion, that the male is getting locked onto the ideas, whether it's arguing about Brexit or a united Ireland or religion or Ukraine or whatever, or vaccinations or whatever. It's not the content, it's actually the emotion that somebody's putting into it, that it's kind of really full of a negativity and anger, and it comes out sometimes as righteousness as well. You get that from everybody, you know, the sense that like somebody is telling you what the right thing to do is, and they're emotionally kind of furious, you know, so that they're telling you what is the right way to behave, or, you know, in modern society we'd be talking about all the ways that are politically correct to speak, or to, you know, to understand the world in politically correct ways, and they'd be telling you this, but they'd be saying it with a kind of an emotion that if you scratched it a little bit, you'd find anger. And it's called righteousness. And that too is a disturbing emotion. And that too, as far as I'd be concerned, would be breaking that principle of non-violence. So if somebody is arguing with you about non-violence and they're really getting kind of red in the face and crossing the eyebrows as they tell you you should be, against war and for peace, they're pushing a non-violent argument, but actually they're being violent in the argument. And I'm just talking about non-violence in terms of speech. And it's easier to think of it in terms of the body. Because again, non-violence in terms of the body would mean that I'm not going to hit anybody, I'm not going to kill anybody. But then you realize it also refers to all sentient beings. And I learned just so much from this one. Like, it transformed my life again, because my daughter was young at the time. She was a little girl, like a child. And we used to find spiders in the bathroom. And up until the time I became a Buddhist, I would get the spider and fling it out the window. Now, the poor spider probably had his legs broken by the time he landed on the windowsill outside. And as for flies, well, my studio had a propensity to gather flies on the windowsill. And I'd be sitting there with my computer and I'd be looking at 3 or 4 flies. And I would roll up a newspaper and I would dispose of the flies very quickly. Sometimes I'd get angry when I couldn't hit them, because they have remarkable ability to avoid you, a fly. And sometimes my anger would be even sustaining me in the energy to keep at it, and I'd be there like for 10, 20 minutes. Somebody might walk into the room and say, "What are you doing?" They'd see me kind of with a big red face and a rolled up newspaper. I'd say, "I'm trying to kill a fly." It's like being a psychopath, with flies. But I used to really do that. And I did it all my life and I never thought about it. I think there was something in the back of my mind was saying this is killing something. There's some little darkness here. Kill a fly. Bang, pounce your hand on him. But when I went into the Buddhist practice and it was saying to be non-violent in body, no killing, like no killing physical, no killing other people. Okay. But no killing flies, no killing spiders. Feck that. Okay. So I tried it. And again, I could feel the improvement. Because I used to focus on this. Like, you couldn't do it if you promise yourself today, for example, that you'll never kill a fly, or that you won't kill a fly in the foreseeable future. Well, you won't be able to escape that promise. Your conscience will come at you. You'll be standing there at a windowsill looking at a fly, and you'll be about to clatter him with a side of a book or something, and your conscience will say, "But you promised never to kill. No violence with your body." You'd have to really get your conscience out of the room if you wanted to kill that fly. So the likelihood is, what happened to me is that I stopped killing flies and I stopped killing spiders. And I think as far as I could go with other little wild insects and so forth, I tried to avoid killing anything. And you might say, well, that was really taking the non-violence to an extreme. But here's what happened. Two things. Number one, there were unexpected consequences. For example, I was teaching my daughter to like spiders. I didn't realize I was doing that. It might have been 10 or 15 years later. I noticed that her attitude to small sentient beings was one of pleasant surprise, and that she would completely by nature remove a spider from the house or get a fly out of the house without killing it. She didn't have to stop herself killing it the way I had to stop myself. And I immediately saw in that the consequences of non-violence, the cause and effect that happens, the karma, the results of an action, good result, in ways that you don't expect. So I didn't expect that in playing this game of non-violence with tiny little insects, I didn't realize this is a way of teaching something beautiful and profound to the next generation, to be more in balance with the wilderness, more in balance with sentient beings. It's the same as with violence of the language, not speaking violently, not saying an angry word or a negative word. I didn't realize that there was a beneficial consequence, that people would actually like me better if I wasn't angry, that people would listen more and enjoy my company more if I was never negative to anybody. And in relation to physical violence, it wasn't just that there was a spin-off for the next generation, a beneficial effect that I hadn't thought about. But there was also, for myself, a deeper sense of acknowledging the sacred in human beings and in all sentient beings. I became much more open, for example, to dogs. I mean, I never had a dog as a child. I didn't know dogs, and so I had no emotion for them, and they just were to me a nuisance. But when I was practicing Buddhism, and my Buddhist practice was not killing a spider if you found one in the bath, it actually made me more open to sentient beings, including dogs. And again, another accidental consequence was having a young child in the house, wants a dog. Daddy, can we get a dog? And I say, yes, of course. And the dog moved in and was with us for 5 years and used to sit and watch the Late Late Show with us. A big Labrador with testicles. And he'd clean his testicles during the Late Late Show, and it tested my patience a few times. But I would look into his eyes and I would see a sentient being. And with the ideas of Buddhism, the whole notion of reincarnation and that all sentient beings are struggling to find enlightenment. It became a completely different relationship. It became one of great love, I think, between me and the animal. and other animals. So I didn't expect those consequences from practicing non-violence with the body by not killing a spider. I was doing so much good, benefiting my own life. And these are ways always that work in Buddhism as rational, logical reasons to be Buddhist. You're not practicing this because of some esoteric idea that you should help all spiders. It's not a twisted sort of, idea about neurotically benefiting everybody else because, like, it's good to benefit other people because blah, de blah, de blah. There's a real functionality about Buddhism. It's a logical, rational way to improve the quality of your own life. You benefit. You actually benefit. And enlightenment is really as simple as that. Enlightenment is that within me, within you, there is an awakening, not to goodness essentially, but to wellness. The awakening of Buddha within is an awakening to wellness, to being here now in a way that it is possible to be full of love for other people and to experience love for other people and to essentially do it by avoiding negative or disturbing emotions. So if you wanted one single summing up that I would put in this little talk, it would be that rather than try and figure out the complexity of Buddhist philosophy, in my life, I found that the simplest way to do it was just pick the things you shouldn't do and don't do them. And do that absolutely. And out of that, every single teaching flowers in your mind. Everything will happen. Everything will happen if you don't kill the fly. Because it's like you're practicing love by not practicing hate. Hatred is like the cloud in the sky. It's a disturbing emotion. It's not the real you. And all you have to do is stop doing the negative thing, and you will actually realize that the positive thing happens naturally. That our natural disposition is to be full of joy. Our natural disposition is to love and be loved. Like deeply, because let's get onto this later, but because of the non-existence of self and the emptiness of all, independent existence means that you and me and everybody else, we're actually all one. The individuality that divides us is actually on the surface. So love is the great, compassion is the great driving force of all human and sentient life. So rather than kind of get 20 volumes of books on Buddhism as to how to be a Buddhist, the simple way is don't do negative things. Stop the negative stuff and you'll find that within you is the positive. It's just there. Now, that was to me the most reassuring thing I've ever discovered in life in terms of a faith journey. That it was if you just turn off the volume of noise in the room, you will actually experience the silence. It's there. Peace. Peace is there. There's a lovely line in the Old Testament, you know, my plan, God speaks, my plan for you is for peace. My plan for you is for peace. You will have peace. There is peace in us. There is peace in us. We will be peaceful if we just stop activating disturbing emotions. Stop killing. Stop being violent physically and verbally. And the final one is in the mind. Body, speech and mind. You know, remember that from last week's talk. You know, a prostration, how you put the hands together on the top of your head. That crown pinnacle at the top of your head signifies the body. And you put the hands together, you join them just under the chin. It signifies speech. Body, speech. And then you put the hands, join the hands at the heart. And that signifies mind. So when you're doing a prostration, those three gestures signify that you are prostrating your body, your speech, and your mind before the Buddha. Body, speech, and mind. And so the mind is the third one with which you must practice non-violence. So not only do you avoid negative actions, you avoid negative words. But not only do you avoid negative words, you avoid negative thoughts. And this may be the most difficult, but it's also the foundation of the other two. So the less negative thoughts you have about flies, the less impulse you will have to kill flies. And that would be the heart and soul of what they call mind training. Training the mind is really finding practices that stop negative energy, stop disturbing emotions. And the basic one, the way that you stop a disturbing emotion, is by what they call an antidote. You know, you find an antidote, you find the opposite of it. Usually it's the opposite. So for example, if I hated Labrador dogs and couldn't stand them, and if my daughter said, oh, I'd love to have a little dog, and I'd say, there's no way, you're not going to bring a dog into this house. Now that would be a disturbing emotion. That would be a negative expression of disturbing emotion, because you're basing it on the fact that you hate dogs, you don't like dogs, you're not going to have a dog in the house. And even if you were to say to your daughter, well, no, we're not having a dog in the house because they're dirty and they'll knock the furniture and they'll do this and they'll do that and do the other. That's also based on a kind of a negativity, kind of a sense that like you have a negative view of the dog. Now you may be right, but you have to open your mind to the other possibility, the possibility that, you know, if you knew more about Labrador dogs, you might like them better. So the antidote would be to find out enough about Labrador dogs that you begin to like them. And I have to say that has occurred in my life just like so many times in the 27 or 28 years that I've been practicing Buddhism, you know, where I meet somebody and I don't like them. And I don't like them because whatever, maybe they're in the wrong political party, or they wear the wrong kind of suits, or, they have the wrong kind of accent. And if I look into that emotion in my heart, I will identify it as just negative. Some people would call it prejudice. And if I then find out something about that person, or think about them in a different way, maybe their personal life story is very, very sad, very human. Maybe there are things about them that I could love, regardless of the fact of what party they're in. So I try to penetrate. I think deeply in relation to something that I'm being negative about. And my object is to change something that I dislike into something I like. And this is particularly important with human beings. They have a wonderful practice for this. And it's called exchanging self for others. And it's also called sort of seeing everybody as a mother being. And I'll go on to talk about it in the next reflection. So that's what we'll be talking about in the third of these reflections on Buddhism. For now, just to finish, I would say that body, speech and mind are three focuses to awaken to. They are the three levels. They're actually the three doors. That's what they call them, the three doors, because they're the doors through which you can do negative stuff. And if you close those doors, so you do not kill, you do not do with your body violent or negative or angry or violent stuff, and if with your speech you do not say a negative thing, and if the foundation of that is negative emotions about other people or about dogs, you stop yourself indulging in negativity about Labrador dogs or flies or whatever. And you use penetrating analysis as the antidote for your mind. You learn about what you think is your enemy. And you learn about the enemy purposefully in order to discover that they are human or beautiful, if they're just a sentient being, not human, but that they are beautiful and loving and caring in their own existence. And ultimately, you try to understand that because there is no real separate autonomous self in existence anywhere, then you and that being are interchangeable. We'll go on to that in the next reflection. For now, it's to say that body, speech and mind are the three doors, the three aspects whereby you try to not be negative. You try not to allow disturbing emotion to nurture either mental activity, verbal activity or physical activity. And when you join your hands, when you take refuge in the Buddha, the ritual of prostrating yourself in front of a little image of the Buddha, that's what you're doing. You're saying that your body, speech and mind, I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the awakening compassion. I take refuge in the compassion that awakens within me, that is me, and that will flourish and come to life if I just control my body, my speech, my mind, so that the door is closed and it never becomes an outlet for negative emotion. And dividing them up into body, speech and mind is really good, because when you categorize them like that, they're actually manageable. If I was to say, just don't be negative, God, that's a huge big thing, you know. What do you mean? It's like, how do I not be negative? Well, categorize it. Don't be negative in things you say, in things you do, in things you think. That doesn't mean you don't fail. I fail 28 years later. I fail every day. I'm negative every day. But at least I have a compass. And that really is the trick, you know. If you take religion as like a manifesto to be enforced on yourself or other people, then you're seriously in trouble. It's a compass. It's a compass that gives balance to your heart. As you fail, and you fail every day, and you're negative every day, and you kill a fly, and you do this and you do that, and because none of us are perfect, but yet it gives you this extraordinary compass that lifts you up, because you're trying all the time to be enlightened, to awaken to your true nature, which is love and compassion, which is just being here in a loving harmony with the wonderful cosmos around you. It's really a pleasure to share these things, because they're challenging me to name them for myself, and in a way it surprises me what I am naming, and it surprises me how simple sometimes it is. That, like everything else, the entire complexity of Buddhist thought is just about being here now. And being here now in a way that anticipates the joy and the compassion that is within you if you get in touch with it. And so it's about just getting rid of the negative stuff. And in the previous talk, I mentioned the physicality of Buddhist practice. And this again is a physicality. Everything in Buddhism, to my mind, in my opinion, is as simple as a physical thing. It's like trying to change the way you are in the world. And you do it physically. You do it in relation to your speech, in relation to your body and your actions, and in relation to your mind. So in those three categories, you're closing the door where negative emotions can come out of you. And when you close the door, you begin to experience who you really are at a deeper level, which is a being of infinite compassion, infinite. And you are present, and you become present to the world around you as a being of infinite compassion. So being here now means something even bigger than you imagined. To be here now is to bring the infinity of your compassion, of who you are, to the present moment. And if the world you live in is full of disturbing emotions around you, then you're bringing it like a light into the darkness. You are a light in the darkness. And you can get there by practical practical things. That's the great value of Buddhism. So thank you for being here. I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful day. Bye-bye.